Okay, welcome back everybody. Today we're going to go over our next lesson in your PPL flight training syllabus, which is exercise 9 turns. So what we're going to talk about are the forces applied to the aircraft in a turn. We're going to introduce adverse yaw, touch on coordinated flight, and then we'll talk about the entry and recovery from a turn, how to roll out on a desired heading, and then we're going to build on climbs and descends by doing climbing turns and descending turns. The reference will be the flight training manual. So the goal of this lesson is to learn how to execute gentle and medium turns, climbing and descending turns, as well as rolling out on a specific heading. The purpose of the lesson, obviously this is required on every flight. You're going to have to turn to get where you're going, so we want to be able to do that safely. We also want to be able to roll out on your heading so we're not constantly banking back and forth. It'll build on the previous lessons, attitudes and movements, climbing and descending. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below and I'll answer those for you. Okay, some background knowledge before we get started. Starting with number 1 here, explain the difference between an attitude and a movement. If you remember, the attitude is always relative to the horizon and the movement is relative to the aircraft axis. How would you describe the reference attitude? 1/3 ground, 2/3 sky. You could say 3 or 4 fingers below the horizon of the nose position. Number 3, how often should a heading indicator be reset to the compass? Roughly every 15 minutes or so. That's the heading indicator is going to precess off the compass, so we just want to check that every 15 minutes at the most. What is our procedure to enter a climb? We learned this last time. We start with the attitude, full power, and trim. Alrighty, so some definitions for today's lesson. A turn is rolling the aircraft about the longitudinal axis to achieve a banked attitude. Gentle turn is a bank angle up to 15 degrees. A medium turn is a bank angle from 15 to 30. A steep turn, we will teach it later on, and it's anything past 30 degrees. Generally, we would use 45. So, forces in a turn. The diagram on the left has an airplane in cruise flight. So you can see the lift and weight are perpendicular and they're equal to each other. So you're in level flight, maintaining a constant altitude. As soon as we bank the aircraft, the lift acts perpendicular to the wing, and while our weight is still acting straight down. So now our lift vector is broken up into a horizontal and vertical component. Only the vertical component is keeping the aircraft flying level. The horizontal component is what's making that aircraft turn. So overall, the overall total lift has to be increased in a bank to maintain level flight. All right, next we're going to look at adverse yaw. So this is one of our, we've touched on slipstream, we've touched on P factor. Adverse yaw is another cause of unwanted yaw. It's also called aileron drag. You may hear some people call it that. But what this is the additional lift produced by the ailerons in the wing when the aircraft is rolling, in this scenario, to the left. So you can see the aircraft is banked to the left. When it's in that roll, the right wing and the aileron are producing more lift, shown by the that arrow. With more lift, we also have additional induced drag. So you can picture the drag just pulling back on the right-hand side of the wing, and that's going to yaw the nose to the right. Now, the yaw is always opposite to the direction of roll. So if we were to roll to the right, then the nose would yaw to the left, assuming we're not using any rudder to correct for that. So the adverse yaw is caused by additional induced drag on the upgoing wing during a roll. Now, once your ailerons are neutral, the adverse yaw goes away because your ailerons are the same deflection. So it only occurs in a roll. So that's important to note. Now, to correct for this, we're just going to use rudder in the direction of the turn. So if you're banking, you're rolling to the left, you would use left rudder. And once you neutralize your aileron to maintain the bank angle, you would also neutralize your rudder. So aileron and rudder always go together in a turn. So here's another diagram just showing that yaw. So this airplane's rolling to the right. The nose will want to yaw left. You'll correct for it by applying right rudder. We do have an instrument that can help us out with this, and it's called the turn coordinator. So if we look at the center diagram here, this is called a coordinated turn. And if we look at the turn coordinator, it's in the bottom left of your six-pack. The ball is centered in the cage. So that means we're in coordinated flight. The tail is following the nose. We're nice and straight. If the ball is outside, either to the left or to the right, we use the saying step on the ball. So looking at the left here, it shows what's called a skidding turn, which would be rolling to the right and applying too much right rudder. The ball would go out to the left. We say you have the saying step on the ball. So for coordinated flight, you would press the left rudder or even just relax your right foot off of the right rudder to get that ball center. Looking to the picture of the right, this one is called a slipping turn, and this is where you would not use any rudder at all. So you're going to roll to the right, you don't use any rudder at all, and the ball's going to go to the right. So very important, when you're rolling right, you'll use just enough right rudder. Rolling left, you would use just enough left rudder to keep the ball in the center. Remember the saying, step on the ball. That's which the correct rudder you got to apply. All right, entering a turn. Step number one, always do a lookout. So we're looking left, we're looking right, ahead of the turn, making sure there's no traffic and no obstacles. Then you're gonna simultaneously roll the airplane to the left and apply rudder in the direction of the roll. Then you're gonna stop the roll and maintain your desired bank attitude. Remembering when you neutralize those ailerons, you're also gonna neutralize the rudder. If we look at our attitude indicator, it will indicate the angle of bank, starting with 0, wings level. The first tick 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, the little dot 45, 60, and 90. A lot of attitude indicators don't have the 45 dot, but you just know it's right in between 60 and 90. What would be the bank angle currently shown on the attitude indicator? Well, it would be about 15 degrees, right in between the 10 and 20 degrees. We can look at the turn coordinator and see that the airplane is banked to the left and the ball is centered, so we are coordinated. Now, I mentioned we need more lift in a bank in order to maintain level flight. So very slight back pressure on the control may be required just to keep the nose up, maintain level flight. If the more you bank, the more noticeable this effect is. Okay, maintaining a turn. Number one, eyes outside and keep the nose on the horizon. And you're looking at the bank angle from the horizon to your cowling. You want to keep that bank angle consistent and keep the eyes outside. If you're inside on the gauges, you're going to lose altitude. You're going to have a varying bank angle, and it's going to be a lot more difficult than just looking outside. From there, you're just dragging the nose across the horizon. So you could see this point where the horizon is on the cowling, and you would just keep that point on the horizon as it came around the turn. You would want to scan your instruments very briefly, half a second at a time, making sure your bank angle is good, then eyes back outside. Look at the turn coordinator, ball centered, eyes back outside. Altimeter, constant at 6,500, eyes back outside. So that's the scanning technique you want to get used to. It's always outside, one gauge, back outside, making sure nothing has changed in your outside visual picture when your eyes are out. Now, rolling out onto a heading or a landmark, if you're using a town, a lake, whatever you want to roll out on, maybe a highway, just before the turn, you're going to simultaneously roll wings level, apply rudder in the direction of the roll to stay coordinated, and you'd release any back pressure that you had if you were holding the nose up in a medium to steep bank. Now, if you wanted to roll out on a specific heading, there is a rule of thumb that you can use, and that's beginning your rollout at half the angle of bank prior to the desired heading. So an example of that is, you want to roll out on east during a 20-degree left bank. So you'd commence that rollout at half of your bank angle. So we're banked at 20, we would roll out 10 degrees early. So as soon as you're coming across, you hit 100 degrees, you'd start that rollout, and by the time your wings level, you're going to be at 090 or east. If you're in a 30-degree bank turn, you would do this 15 degrees early. If you're in a 10-degree bank turn, you would do it 5 degrees early. It's as simple as that. Okay, let's look at climbing turns. So, step number 1, always do your lookout. Make sure you're clear left, right, and above. And then we'll do things one step at a time here. So you're going to initiate your climb, attitude, power, trim, climbing and doing a normal climb, airspeed. Once you're established in that climb, then you'll roll the aircraft to initiate the turn. Remember your rudder to stay coordinated, and then just maintain that bank angle around. In a climbing turn, the aircraft has a tendency to continue to bank or to overbank. And the reason for that is in a nose up banked attitude, the upgoing wing or the wing on the outside of the turn has a higher angle of attack. If it has a higher angle of attack, it's going to be producing more lift. So it wants to continue to lift that wing up. That's shown by this diagram here. We have a gain in height compared to your horizontal distance traveled. But if you just look at the angle of attack relative to the relative wind here, you can see the angle difference shown underneath the wing. So there's a very small angle. When we look at the outside wing, we have a large angle of attack shown right there. So that's really the only way to visualize that. If you try to picture it in your head, it's very hard. So let's look at the recovery here. One thing I will mention is when you're in a climbing turn, the maximum angle of bank is 15 degrees, and that is to prevent overbanking, and it's to prevent a stall, which may lead to a spin. So climbing turn, maximum 15 degrees angle of bank is our safety limitation there. All right, leveling out. So now it depends what comes first. Is it the altitude you're climbing to, or is it your heading? Let's say the altitude comes first. So you would maintain your bank, but you're going to lower the nose to the cruise attitude, reduce your power and trim, keep the turn going until you're a little bit early of that heading, and then you're going to roll out wings level. Or if the heading comes first, you're going to roll wings level, keep the nose up in a climb at your desired airspeed, and then you hit your altitude, attitude, power, trim, and you're back to cruise flight. They could happen simultaneously, and then there's a lot going on, but you'd be rolling wings level, pitching for the cruise. Once you're at a safe airspeed, bring that power back all at once. So the climbing turn is where you really start to develop a good scan of outside, inside, and then leveling out when you need. Next, we'll talk about a descending turn. Very similar. Do the lookout, left, right, and below. Initiate the descent first. So reduce your power. Remember, do that mental math beforehand to get that power setting. 100 RPM is going to equal to 100 feet per minute at a constant airspeed. Then we're going to roll into the turn, obviously applying rudder to stay coordinated, and then maintain that desired bank angle with neutral aileron and rudder. So looking at the descending turn, No more than 30 degrees angle of bank in a descending turn. The reason for this, we can go more, is looking at our diagram. The wing that has a higher angle of attack is the downgoing wing, or the wing on the inside of the turn. So if the lower wing is producing more lift, it's just trying to bring the wings back level, which is totally safe. That's fine. So we can go up to a 30 degrees angle of bank. Anything more than that, you start to get a really high descent rate. It's just aggressive. You don't need a 45-degree angle of bank in a descending turn. 30 degrees is the limitation. Once again, we look at the loss in altitude, or the angle of attack from the wing and the relative wind, and you'll see the larger angle of attack is on the inboard wing. The recovery, depending what comes first, either the altitude or your heading, you're going to level the wings on the heading, continue the descent, or you'll level out, continue the roll. They could happen together. So we'll practice these out in the practice area, just working on increasing your workload, leveling out on your altitude and your heading at the same time. All right, let's go over some review questions for today's lesson. Like always, you can pause the video, go through them, and then I'm going to bring up the answers here. So number one, why do we use rudder when rolling into and recovering from a turn? That's because anytime we're rolling the airplane, there's going to have adverse yaw. The rudder will prevent this. Number two, in a climbing turn, which wing has a higher angle of attack? Well, if we're in a climbing turn, it's the wing on the outside of the turn, or the upgoing wing, same thing. Number three, what is the maximum bank angle in a descending turn? That would be 30 degrees in a descending turn, 15 degrees in a climbing turn. How would you describe adverse yaw? The way I would describe it, when the airplane is rolling, the upgoing wing is producing more lift, therefore it has more induced drag, pulling back on that wing, yawing the nose, opposite to the direction of roll. Okay, a couple safety items for today. So effective lookouts before and during the turn, just like always. Confirming who's in control using the phraseology, I have control, you have control. No more than 15 degrees angle of bank in a climbing turn. No more than 30 degrees angle of bank in a descending turn. So today we covered another fundamental skill, turns. You're able to fly the aircraft in different banked attitudes. We're going to learn go up, we'll recover on the different headings. And from here, the next lesson we're going to touch on is flight for range and endurance. So it's just establishing the aircraft in the different configurations, whether you want range or endurance. So we'll also learn about the mixture control and what range and endurance is on the next lesson. If you have any questions, please leave them down below, and I'll be happy to answer those for you. But that's everything. If you want to prepare for the next lesson, we're going to go for range and endurance, and you can also read up on the approach and landing out of the flight training manual.